Hi, so good to see you again. You're watching Straight from the Doctor's Desk with me, Dr. Andrea Purcell. I have a vegan pumpkin pie recipe for you today. I am so excited about this. I love healthy desserts because they don't trigger regrets and don't compromise our health. So I am perpetually on the lookout for healthy recipes that I can share with you. So I do love a good pumpkin pie. Maybe you're not a pumpkin pie person, but maybe you are. So for years, this goes back to like me, even in high school, I had been trying to perfect the right pumpkin pie. So I started out making pie from fresh pumpkins. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but it was a lot of work. It took 5 hours and I ended up with less than great results. Then I said, all right, don't overthink it. Let's just move on to Libby's pumpkin in a can. My reasoning was, well, Libby must know what she's doing. She's been in the business for a long time. The issue with that recipe is it calls for eggs and condensed milk, and it was really just too sweet. So that didn't work out for me either. Then I moved to plain pumpkin puree, and one year I had a really heavy hand with cinnamon and nutmeg, and to the point where my family members were like, whoa, this is really nutmeggy. So then fast forward maybe 5, 7 more years, I learned that eggs and dairy were inflammatory for myself and many others. And so I tried a coconut-based vegan pumpkin pie. The coconut was very overpowering to the whole recipe, and I couldn't taste the pumpkin at all. So that was a bust. So after all these trials, I took a break for a little while. I couldn't figure out how to make a vegan pumpkin pie that held its consistency and actually tasted like a real pumpkin pie. So I guess the moral of the story is I have 2 points today. The first is when trying to swap out unhealthy ingredients for healthy ones in a traditional recipe, there's going to be some trial and error. It's rare to nail it on the first try. And the next thing is not to think of it as a failure, but to think of it as a challenge instead of accepting defeat, because if you persist, you will succeed. And that's what ended up happening with my story here. So finally, I came upon this recipe that I'm sharing with you today. It uses unsweetened almond milk in place of dairy or evaporated milk. It uses cornstarch in place of eggs. And I have to say, I've made it multiple times so far, and it has come out brilliantly. So of course, I wanted to share it with you. So I want to give you a couple of tips because maybe you're sensitive to corn, you can't do cornstarch. So alternatives to cornstarch would be potato starch or arrowroot powder. Also, sometimes when you cook a pumpkin pie, it will get a giant crack running down the center of the pie once it's done. And the key there is not to cool it down so quickly. So what I do when the pie is done, I turn the oven off, and then I leave the pie inside the oven, but I open the oven door. And then the pie will slowly cool down with the oven. Then once all the heat has dissipated, I place the pie on a trivet to continue the cooling process. And then once you cool it, you can keep it in the fridge for up to 5 days. And that helps prevent the cracking that happens at the top of the pie. So I can't wait for you to check out this recipe. You'll see it below. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you like this post, just come and visit me on the web at www.drandreapurcell.com. And happy baking to you.